I would like to give the floor, because we are late in schedule, to Ambassador Ries for the observations of today's Europe and today's Eurozone from somebody over the Atlantic. Please.
Thank you very much. You want me to use this one? Can everyone hear me? Well, thank you very much. Thanks especially to Simeon Simokos, who was kind enough to invite me back to Greece. It's a great pleasure to be here. I'm very impressed at how many people are here putting their weekend into discussing these very serious issues for the country. I think that says good things for the country and its future. It's a special privilege to be back up here in Delphi without a Cadillac, without bodyguards. It reminds me of the old story. You know how you can tell an American ambassador who returns to Dulles Airport in Washington. He's the guy who goes to Hertz, rents a car, sits in the back seat waiting for someone to drive him. I've been retired now for a number of years, so I've gotten over that. And just it's a great pleasure to be in Greece as a fellow Philhellene. I'm going to talk a little bit about all of the multivariate problems that afflict Europe at the moment. Things indeed are very bad, and there's great concern about Europe and Europe's evolution in Washington amongst Americans, amongst those who love Europe and wish it well. It seems to me that the European construction, as they say in Brussels, is at risk, and seriously this time. It's been at risk before, but it seems this time much more serious. There are tensions. There are tensions between, if you will, solidarity and selfishness. There are tensions between crisis and long-term thinking. Let me talk a little bit about the dimensions of the crisis. First of all, there is the Eurozone crisis. It used to be the only crisis afflicting the the European Union. Unfortunately, for the focus on the Euro crisis and for responsibility in dealing with it, it is not the only game in town. There is the Ukraine-Crimea crisis. The Russia unhappy at the way that Kiev's plan to negotiate a trade agreement with the EU was going, and taken by surprise at the rapid collapse of the Yanukovych regime that had close associations with his own security-based and quite corrupt regime in Moscow, found himself motivated to seize Crimea after Yanukovych fell, and in the light of the Maidan demonstrations. This was a very thorough blow at the post-war European security architecture, and it changes everyone's perception of Russia and what Russia might do. And while the European Union has been very responsible and helpful in adopting sanctions on the Russians in response for this changing of the border of Europe, quickly it will constitute a challenge in a way that we thought we didn't have to face. We thought that the post-Cold War borders of Europe and the basic assumptions under which European security was laid were immutable. We were wrong. There is an extremism crisis. We all read all the time about the growth of the horrific Islamic State in Iraq and Syria, the terrible things that they do to people under their control, and the crisis that is causing in the region, and in Libya is driving some of the migration, which is a crisis yet in the future. In the future of my talk, it's a very, very real one now. But I think there is an extremism crisis in Europe. Charlie Hebdo attacks, the attacks in November in Paris, the security challenges to European institutions to be able to foil such attacks. Then, of course, there is the migration crisis itself, if you will, the non-extremist migration crisis, the refugee crisis, and then the economic migrants that accompany them. We've talked about this over the last 2 days quite a bit, but it stresses all of the European Union's institutions and traditions. It puts at risk Schengen, as we've already talked about. And there's the Brexit crisis. David Cameron started this as a rash promise in the election that he would renegotiate the basis of UK's relationship to Europe and then have a referendum. He's completed the renegotiation and he's scheduled the referendum. That comes about in June of this year, and it's really a stunning gamble, in a sense, for the UK's future with Europe. And not only is it a gamble for the UK's own economy, but it's also a gamble for the European Union itself. For Europe without the UK, without its size and economic weight, is a much, much diminished Europe, and it may have other implications. There are other Eurosceptic members of the European Union which may be inspired by that. And of course, this takes place in the context of just an explosion of populism all over the industrialized world. Not only do we see populism in Hungary, populism in Poland, we see it in our own country, in my own country, the United States. And in some senses, one wonders, all right, so we've got 5, 6 streams of crisis all at once. What is the source of this? Where did it come from? How is it going to be resolved? And I think in each country that is involved in the European Union, and in my own country too, we've come from a period of economic stress, and we've come from a period, I see, of blaming the institutions of Brussels, the institutions of Washington for the problems. Let me just wrap up by saying a little bit about how the United States views this series of crises. The United States is very concerned. You see think tankers like myself, you see leaders. The president himself is quite concerned about the possibility of the erosion of support for Europe. We've been very supportive, the president, Treasury Secretary, others behind the scenes, in urging Europe to be proactive in terms of the debt relief that is necessary for dealing with the euro crisis. We've been very supportive of deployments forward in dealing with the Russians. We've been very supportive of forces fighting the extremists in Syria and Iraq, managed, in fact, to slow and stop the momentum of ISIS. We probably haven't done as much as we should on migration, but it's probably worth saying that, as I understand it, over 50% of the money contributed to the UN agencies, UNHCR and UNESCO and the others, for assistance to the refugees in Jordan, Lebanon, and Turkey. Some $3 billion come from the U.S., and we have stepped up, and much more needs to be done. And on Brexit, there are plans of the administration, and I think it's no secret to speak up on behalf of our strong view that the UK belongs in Europe. Overall, the United States in many ways is the best European. We always hoped for the best out of the European Union and the process that brought it about. And we are committed, if Europe is ready, to do a transatlantic trade and investment partnership agreement that would eliminate remaining duties and other barriers to trade across the Atlantic. I used to assume that the muddle-through option would be the most likely way that Europe would develop. I used to call it Ries's rule, which was that when all else fails, muddle through is the most likely outcome for any European crisis. With 5, 6 crises going at once, and with the strength of populism in many countries and the stresses and strains that the global political environment place on Europe, well, I can't be quite as confident that muddle through will work this time. And we certainly will do all that we can to support our friends in Europe to coming up with a more successful outcome. Thank you very much.